They were laughing in the next room when I first heard my name. The laughter didn't sound joyful. It sounded sharp, like the clicking of knives. My son, Darren, was saying something about the kitchen tiles, how they'd have to replace them after we take over. I was sitting at the edge of the bed, staring at the carpet, listening through the cracked door. I didn't move. I didn't speak. That's what they'd come to expect from me. Silence. 3 months had passed since Robert died. My husband, my only real protector in this house. He died with his hand wrapped around mine, and a question in his eyes, a question I still ask myself at night. Would they treat you kindly when I'm gone? They didn't. After the funeral, Darren and his wife Melanie began visiting more often. Not to check on me, not to grieve, but to measure, to whisper, to count the cupboards and look through old drawers. I caught her one day in the master bedroom, holding up fabric samples. She smiled like I wasn't even there. Then she said, "We'll have to paint this room sage green." They hadn't even asked me if I was moving out. They assumed. I remember standing at the window that night, the wind pushing against the panes. I looked at the garden Robert had planted, the one with the roses and mint leaves, and the little sundial he restored after his heart surgery. I stood there and thought, you told me to wait. You told me not to speak too soon. I reached down and opened the bottom drawer under my bed. It creaked, stiff with age, and there, inside a flat brown envelope, was the paper he gave me 2 weeks before he died. His voice still lives inside that moment. "They're not ready, Nora, but you'll know when to open it." I didn't open it then. I just looked at it, pressed my fingers to the paper, then slid the drawer shut again. The next morning, Darren came in with coffee. He didn't usually bring me anything, so I was already on edge. He sat across from me and said, "Mum, we've been thinking. You're getting older. It might be time to consider something smaller. Maybe a senior apartment near the lake." He smiled like it was a gift, like I should thank him for pushing me out of my home. I nodded slowly. "You've already chosen the paint color. Don't pretend this is for me." He laughed, but not kindly. "Come on, Mum. Let's not make this difficult. You know Dad always said the house would go to me." He did say that, years ago, when Darren still came home for dinner, before he started rolling his eyes at the garden, before he told Robert he didn't need old man advice on his investments. But what Darren didn't know was that people change. Even husbands, even fathers, even lawyers, when they're told the full truth. Later that day, I found Melanie in the attic, pulling boxes down. She smiled, wide and fake. "I figured we could start clearing space. Maybe donate some of your old dishes." I didn't reply. I just looked at her. My silence made her nervous. She laughed again. "It's just stuff, Nora. No use hanging on to the past." But the past was all I had, and it was about to become her future if I stayed quiet. Night. I opened the drawer again. My hands were shaking. The envelope was thick, heavier than I remembered. My name was written on it, in Robert's steady, looping script. Inside, the title deed, his signature, a note from the notary, and one small piece of paper, a personal letter, just 5 words. "It's not Darren's house, Nora. If you've ever watched someone be pushed aside because they're quiet, because they're old, because people think silence means surrender, then listen closely. Because what they didn't know was this. The house wasn't promised to Darren. Not anymore. And I wasn't done yet. If you believe some stories deserve to be remembered, don't forget to subscribe. I have more to share, and this one is far from over." The call came 2 days later. I was in the kitchen when I heard Darren's voice down the hallway. The way he spoke changed when he was on the phone. Louder, smoother, like someone playing a part. I stood still, the sponge in my hand dripping into the sink. He said the words I'd been expecting. "Yes, she's still living there, but it's just a formality. The house is basically mine now." I didn't hear the lawyer's side. I didn't need to. I'd been in this house long enough to hear what people don't say. Darren paused, then laughed. "Yeah, I'm her son. Only child. Dad always said I'd get it. No will change as far as I know." That last sentence hung in the air. As far as I know. They were treating my home like a waiting room, somewhere they had to sit before claiming their prize. The next morning, Melanie came in with paint samples again. This time she was bolder. She laid them out on the dining table like blueprints. "I've scheduled the painter for next week," she said cheerfully. "We'll start in the entryway. I'm thinking white oak floors and sage walls, something modern but soft." I looked at her, and she smiled back as if I were an elderly tenant, not a widow in her own home. "You know, she added. If we went out the back unit, we could use that income to renovate the kitchen. That back unit? Robert built that for my cousin Judith when she lost her husband. He laid every tile himself, and now Melanie was calculating rental returns. Still, I said nothing. She took my silence for agreement. That night I sat by the window again. The garden was quiet, but not still. The leaves trembled in the wind like they were trying to say something. I opened the drawer, not to read the deed, just to look at it, to remind myself that I wasn't imagining things, that I wasn't losing my mind, that I hadn't spent 50 years building a home just to be evicted by entitlement wrapped in politeness. The document was exactly where I left it. Signed, dated, witnessed. Robert hadn't left it to Darren. He'd left it to someone who cared for him, when his own son didn't show up to the hospital. The next day, Darren sat me down at the kitchen table. His voice was calm, but practiced, like someone delivering news they'd already decided was final. Mum, I talked to Mr. Levine, Dad's old lawyer. He's helping us start the transfer paperwork. I didn't blink. He continued. It'll be easier if you don't contest it. There's no will filed, so it'll default to me anyway. I just need your signature to start moving forward. He slid a manila folder across the table. I didn't open it. I looked at his hand instead, the same hand that used to clutch mine when he was afraid of thunderstorms. You didn't even ask me, I said softly. He blinked. Ask you what? If I was staying? If I wanted to leave? If this house meant anything to me? He sighed, the way impatient sons do. Mom, we're trying to help. You've got a lot of space here, too much for one person. Don't make this harder than it has to be. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat upright in bed, the folder still on the table across from me, unopened. I thought about my niece Clara, the girl who showed up every Sunday with groceries even when Robert was dying and the house smelled of medicine. The girl who clipped my roses when I had arthritis in my hands. The girl who never asked for anything, only ever brought something. She didn't know it, but Robert had noticed. He noticed everything. And one day, when Darren forgot Robert's birthday, and Melanie refused to cancel her spa trip to help him into the tub, Robert had looked at me and said, maybe blood doesn't make someone family. Maybe love does. That was the day he changed the deed. The next morning, I made tea. I placed the envelope next to the untouched manila folder. Then, I waited. At noon, Darren came in, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ready to sign, Mum? I picked up the envelope. What's that? I looked him in the eye for the first time in weeks. It's the truth, and it's been sitting under my bed while you planned your new paint colours. He laughed, but it wasn't real. Come on, what truth? There's no will. I placed the deed on the table and slid it toward him. He didn't open it. He just stared at me like he didn't recognize the woman sitting across from him. If you've ever watched someone assume they'd already won, just because you were quiet, if you've ever felt like your memories were being bulldozed in the name of convenience, then you'll understand what I did next. And if you do, subscribe, because the truth only matters when someone speaks it out loud. And I'm ready now. Darren didn't open the envelope. He just stared at it, like it might bite him. His fingers hovered, then dropped. He stood up, pacing now. Where did you even get this? He asked, the edge in his voice no longer hidden. I didn't answer. I just looked down at my tea, then back at him. It's been under the bed since before your father passed. He scoffed. And you're just pulling this out now? Why didn't Dad ever mention it to me? That question didn't deserve an answer, but I gave him one anyway. Because you stopped asking questions when you thought you already owned the answers. His mouth twitched. He opened the envelope finally, pulling out the deed. His eyes scanned it quickly, but his face changed by the second. Pale, quiet, then flushed. He gave it to Clara. I nodded. He did. And not out of spite, out of reason. He shook his head, voice rising. Clara? Our cousin? The girl who used to sleep in the guest room when she couldn't pay rent. She's not family like that. I let him say it all. I let him spit the venom he thought made him strong. But the room had already shifted. He could feel it. The paper in his hands held more weight than his words. I'm calling Mr. Levine, he said, grabbing his phone. Good, I replied, because you'll want him to verify the signature, and the seal, and the date, all of which are real. The next day, we met at Mr. Levine's office. The same lawyer who had handled Robert's affairs for 20 years. He greeted Darren first, then me. He looked older than I remembered, but his eyes still held clarity. Darren wasted no time. She's saying Dad changed the deed, gave the house to Clara, This has to be a mistake. Mr. Levine took the envelope gently. He placed the documents under a desk lamp and pulled on a pair of glasses. The room went quiet. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. He looked up. "This is legitimate," he said simply. "Dated 6 weeks before Robert's passing. Properly signed, witnessed, notarized. He brought it to me himself." Karen's voice cracked. "But why? Why would he do that?" Mr. Levine didn't answer. He simply turned to me. "Did Robert explain his decision to you?" I nodded. "He said he wanted the house to go to the person who never made him feel like a burden. He said Clara gave him peace. That she reminded him of the home he used to know." There was silence in the room, the kind that wraps around your ribs and makes it hard to breathe. Darren sat back, stunned. He had always believed love came with birthrights. That being a son guaranteed ownership. But Robert saw deeper than blood. He remembered the week he collapsed in the garden, and Darren didn't pick up his phone. Clara drove across the city with a bag of groceries and warm socks, and stayed for 2 nights. He remembered when Melanie sent the caregiver home early because she had plans. Clara stayed on the couch, holding Robert's hand when the tremors started. That's when he changed the deed. Clara didn't even know. She still came by every Sunday, helping me water the plants and bring fresh bread. She never asked questions, never assumed anything was owed. When I called her that afternoon, she cried. She didn't understand. "I thought he hated paperwork," she laughed, through tears. "I just did what anyone would do." But not everyone did. Darren stopped calling when things got hard. Melanie got bored. They wanted the house, but not the memories in it. Clara showed up for the memories. That's what Robert saw. Mr. Levine folded the documents carefully and placed them in a folder. "This house legally belongs to Clara now. The title deed overrides any verbal claims or assumptions." Darren stood. His face was blank. "So that's it? I don't even get a say?" Mr. Levine looked at him kindly, but firmly. "Your father had a say, and he used it." Later that night, I sat in the same chair by the window. The garden looked different now. Not because anything had changed, but because something had been restored. I wasn't proud of how long I stayed silent, but I was proud of what silence had preserved. I never raised my voice. I never begged. I never threatened. I just waited, and the truth waited with me. Robert had trusted me with his final decision, not because I was loud, but because I listened, because I saw what he saw. And when the time came, I opened the drawer. If you've ever seen someone dismissed because they didn't fight loud enough, if you've ever kept something buried until the world was ready to hear it, then you know what it means to hold the truth quietly, and let it speak when the time is right. Subscribe if the story reminds you of someone who deserves to be remembered. Because we're not done yet. Clara didn't want to come at first. I had called her after the meeting with Mr. Levine. Her voice trembled through the phone. "Aunt Nora, I can't take the house. It doesn't feel right." But I told her what Robert told me. Word for word. "You didn't earn it with effort. You earned it with presence. That's what your uncle valued. Not blood, not noise, just presence." She cried for a long time. Then, she said thank you, softly, like she meant it. 2 days later, I met her at the gate, with a small silver key in my hand, Robert's key, the same one he carried on his chain since 1984. She took it, eyes wide, hands shaking. She didn't walk into the house like she owned it. She walked in like she was returning to something sacred. She didn't rearrange the furniture. She didn't tear up the garden. She asked if I'd like to stay in the guest room for a while. And I did. Darren stopped coming around, not out of shame, not even anger. Just distance, the kind that grows when people realize they were wrong, but can't say it out loud. Melanie sent a message once, through someone else, asking if we would reconsider, maybe sell the house and split it fairly. We didn't reply. What would be fair to them wasn't fair to Robert, and in the end, his voice was the only one that mattered. Clara brought new life into the home, but not by changing it, by honoring it. She baked in the same kitchen I once danced barefoot in after Robert's first heart surgery. She swept the front porch each morning, just like he used to. She added fresh lavender by the gate, her own quiet signature. And every Sunday, she made a cup of tea and set it at Robert's old chair, just for a moment, just to remember. One afternoon, I asked her if she ever felt strange living here, knowing how it all unfolded. She looked at me, serious. "Aunt Nora, I never thought I'd inherit anything. But when I walk these halls, I don't feel greedy. I feel trusted. That's heavier than anything I ever imagined." I smiled, because she was right. This wasn't about walls or land. It was about legacy. And sometimes legacy chooses the one who shows up, not the one who speaks the loudest. Weeks passed, the house settled. So did I. One morning I opened that drawer one last time, not to check, not to hold the envelope, but to slide it empty, to remind myself that secrets, when kept too long, can harden. But when shared at the right time, they become justice. I placed a photo inside instead, the one of Robert in the garden, dirt on his hands, pride in his eyes. I closed the drawer, and I left it there. This house never asked for war. It only asked for memory, for hands that understood soil, for voices that didn't shout, but stayed. In the end, Darren will remember it as the house that got away. Clara will remember it as the house that let her in, and I will remember it as the house that waited, until the truth was ready to speak. If you've ever been underestimated because you were quiet, if you've ever held something in your heart, waiting for the right moment to be heard, then you already know. Some drawers don't stay closed forever, and some deeds don't need permission to speak. If this story moved you, subscribe, not just for me, but for every elder whose silence was mistaken for surrender. I still have stories to tell, and some of them are buried even deeper.